and they said I'd get nothing. Losers.
I'm a 43-year-old construction professional who spent 2 full decades climbing from the absolute bottom rung to what I considered a respectable position in the industry. Started out as a basic framing carpenter making $12 per hour, eventually worked my way up through sheer determination and long hours to senior project manager at one of the bigger construction firms in our city, earning around $92,000 annually. Not wealthy by local standards where tech money drives everything, but solid middle-class income that let my wife and me live comfortably in a nice 3-bedroom house near one of the popular parks in town. My specialty became managing high-end residential towers in the upscale districts where wealthy people lived. I'd manage construction crews of 65 workers, coordinate directly with architects on complex designs, keep multi-million-dollar developments on tight schedules. When you're building a 20-story structure, every single detail matters critically. One major screw-up in the foundation work and the entire project collapses. I learned that lesson the hard way back in 2019 when a subcontractor poured concrete before the reinforcement inspection was completed. Cost us 3 weeks of project delays and $150,000 to properly fix the mistake. That experience taught me to document absolutely everything. Follow every protocol religiously, never cut corners regardless of pressure from above. That obsessive attention to detail and meticulous documentation would become absolutely crucial in the legal warfare that followed. I'd been married to Emma for nearly 10 years when this all went down. She was gorgeous, sophisticated, educated, came from the kind of old generational money that built our city back when oil was the foundation of everything economic. Her family, the Blackwoods, owned approximately half the commercial properties in the downtown core, buildings that had been generating massive rental income for 3 generations. They never once thought some working-class construction guy was remotely good enough for their precious daughter. They made that position crystal clear when they absolutely insisted I sign this prenuptial agreement before our wedding ceremony back in December 2017. Her father, Victor, who everyone called Vic, sat me down in his attorney's fancy office on the main commercial street downtown. The place screamed money with its mahogany furniture, leather chairs, expensive artwork on the walls. He explained in this condescending tone that it was purely to protect family assets. Nothing personal against me, specifically. Just standard business practice for their social class. The phrase he used was just business, nothing personal. I signed the 9-page document without giving it serious thought because love makes you do incredibly stupid things. I was completely head over heels for Emma at that point. The prenup seemed straightforward on first glance. What belonged to them stayed with them. What belonged to me stayed with me. Anything we accumulated together during the marriage would be considered shared marital property under state law. Simple enough, or so I believed at the time. I had no idea that document would eventually become the weapon that destroyed them. The Blackwood family mansion sat in the wealthy hills overlooking the lake, something straight out of those primetime TV dramas about rich Texas families. 8,000 square feet of limestone and attitude. Every time we drove up for their mandatory Sunday dinners, I felt like some peasant applying for a job I'd never qualify for no matter what I did. Vic collected vintage luxury watches and exclusive club memberships with waiting lists that stretched longer than construction permit approval times. His most prized timepiece was some rare model from 1953, worth more than I made in an entire year of hard work. His wife Charlotte organized charity fundraisers for causes she couldn't even pronounce correctly, but could definitely use for substantial tax deductions. Emma's older brother Dylan held some vice president title at Blackwood Properties, despite never actually working a legitimate day in his entire privileged life. They tolerated my presence at family gatherings, barely. I was the blue-collar construction guy their daughter married, during what they clearly viewed as her rebellious phase. They figured, eventually, I'd get exhausted by their world of country clubs and charity galas, or she'd get bored with mine of construction sites and work boots. Emma worked part-time as a curator at the Contemporary Art Museum downtown, bringing in maybe $31,000 annually. She did it more for personal fulfillment and passion than actual financial necessity, since her substantial trust fund ensured she never wanted for anything material. We discussed having children eventually, maybe purchasing a larger house in a better neighborhood someday, all the normal married couple conversations about building a future together. She had this one peculiar habit that absolutely drove me insane, though. Every single week without fail, she'd spend $50 on lottery tickets at the big grocery store on the south side, always playing identical numbers based on family birthdays, anniversaries, the date we first met. "Someday these numbers are going to make us rich," she'd always joke while filling out the tickets. I calculated once that over 10 years she'd burned through more than $23,000 on those lottery tickets. I'd tease her constantly about it, saying that money could have been a substantial down payment on a vacation property at the lake. She'd always laugh and respond that when we hit the jackpot big, I'd thank her for the persistence and patience. November 15th of last year, a Thursday afternoon. I remember the exact day because I was reviewing architectural blueprints for a new tower development in the eastern part of the city. 24 stories, $45 million total project budget, absolutely massive undertaking. Emma called my cell at exactly 4:17 in the afternoon, screaming so loud I literally had to hold the phone away from my ear to avoid going deaf. She was completely incoherent at first, just shrieking about how we'd won something. "Oh my God, Connor, we won. We actually won." I initially assumed maybe she meant some art competition at the museum, perhaps a $50 gift certificate to the organic grocery store, or something similarly modest. When I finally got her to speak clearly and slow down, she told me we'd won the lottery. Not just any prize, but the massive jackpot. $16.8 million before taxes. After the federal government took their massive cut, and fortunately our state doesn't tax lottery winnings at all, we were looking at approximately $11.2 million in actual take-home money. I drove home in my pickup truck so recklessly fast, I'm genuinely shocked the police didn't pull me over for dangerous driving. Found Emma in our kitchen, literally dancing in circles, waving the lottery ticket around like some victory flag, tears of joy streaming down her face. For maybe 30 minutes total, I genuinely believed our dreams had finally come true after years of struggling to make ends meet and living modestly. Emma was already on her phone with her parents, screaming with pure joy about how we'd actually done it, how we were legitimately rich now, how everything was going to change. That same evening, the entire Blackwood family materialized at our house like vultures sensing opportunity. Vic, Charlotte, Dylan, even Emma's insufferably snobbish Aunt Margaret, who normally pretended I didn't exist at family functions. They arrived carrying expensive champagne, bottles that probably cost $300 each, fancy flowers, the complete works. But something felt fundamentally wrong immediately. From the precise moment they walked through our door, the way they looked at me had fundamentally changed. It was subtle initially. Sideways glances, whispered conversations that abruptly stopped whenever I entered a room. Emma seemed different too, distant and cold, like she was seeing me for the first time and strongly disliked what she observed. Vic kept repeating how we needed to be intelligent about this windfall, how this kind of money required proper professional management, experienced financial advisors, sophisticated legal protection structures. Charlotte added pointedly that family money needed family oversight, shooting me this look that made her meaning perfectly clear to everyone in the room. Over the following 3 days, the situation deteriorated rapidly and obviously. Emma started having these lengthy private phone calls with her parents and brother. She'd leave whatever room I was in when I approached, speaking in hushed whispers I couldn't quite hear. When I attempted to discuss our plans for the money, maybe paying off our mortgage completely, finally starting that construction company I'd dreamed about for years, she became incredibly evasive and dismissive. She'd say we needed to think everything through carefully, that her father knew experienced people in finance, that we couldn't just spend it recklessly like we'd won some church raffle prize. November 18th, exactly 3 days after winning, Emma asked me to come home early from the construction site, said we needed to have a serious conversation about our future together. I walked into our living room and discovered the entire Blackwood family waiting there like some twisted intervention scenario. Vic wearing his $3,000 tailored Brioni suit, Charlotte clutching her Hermes designer handbag that probably cost more than my truck, Dylan smirking by the window like he knew secrets I didn't, like this was all some game they were winning. Emma looked genuinely nervous, her hands shaking slightly, which should have been my massive red warning flag that something terrible was coming. She started talking in this unnaturally formal voice about how we needed to discuss our situation and make some difficult decisions. Vic cleared his throat importantly and launched into this prepared speech about how lottery windfalls change everything fundamentally, how Emma's windfall required proper legal protection from people who might try to take advantage. I interrupted and corrected him firmly, saying it was our windfall. We were married. Community property under state law, right? The room went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop on those expensive Persian rugs covering their hardwood floors. Vic continued explaining carefully that lottery winnings could be considered separate property in certain legal cases under specific circumstances, especially when certain conditions existed. Then Emma dropped the bomb that shattered everything. Her voice barely above a whisper, she told me she thought we should separate for a while, that she needed space. She wanted me to move out that very night, immediately. I felt like someone had dropped a steel beam directly on my chest, crushing my lungs. I managed to ask what the hell was happening, why she was doing this. Emma couldn't even meet my eyes when she said the money was hers because she'd personally picked the numbers. She'd physically bought the ticket. It was her luck. Vic leaned forward like some predatory bird circling wounded prey and explained that the prenup I'd signed years ago protected both parties, that Emma's lottery winnings constituted her separate property under the agreement, meaning I wasn't entitled to a single dollar of it. I sat there absolutely stunned, my mind racing. 10 years of marriage, building a life together, supporting each other, and they were discarding me like construction site garbage, the precise moment significant money entered the picture. Dylan actually laughed out loud from his position by the window, making some snide comment about how I had to know this day would eventually arrive, that I must have seen it coming. I stood up slowly and told them fine, I'd pack my belongings and leave. Emma looked relieved that I was surrendering so easily without making a scene. Her family seemed genuinely pleased with how smoothly this was proceeding, like they'd won some battle. They had absolutely no clue what they'd just started, or how badly they'd miscalculated. I checked into a budget hotel near the airport that night, paying $125 per night with my Visa credit card. Room 247, a sterile box with beige walls and that distinctive industrial carpet cleaner smell that permeates cheap hotels. But instead of sitting there drowning in self-pity and cheap beer like they probably expected, I did something they likely never anticipated. I got to work immediately. 20 years managing major construction projects had taught me one fundamental truth that overrides everything else. Documentation beats emotion every single time without exception. When a subcontractor claims they weren't supposed to install specific materials, you pull out the detailed specifications. When an architect insists the measurements are incorrect, you show them the professional survey. Evidence wins arguments, period. No exceptions ever. I spent 3 sleepless nights in that depressing hotel room, laptop open continuously, researching state family code statutes until my eyes burned and my vision blurred from exhaustion. I started with the absolute basics, the foundational statute section 3.003 that establishes the presumption that property acquired during marriage is community property by default. Then I went deeper, much deeper into case law. Precedent cases, appellate court decisions, specific rulings about lottery winnings, the complex distinction between separate versus community property, how commingling assets affects legal classification, what happens when couples mix funds together. I took detailed notes like I was studying for some crucial professional licensing exam that would determine my future. Then I built this massive detailed spreadsheet tracking everything. Every single lottery ticket purchase Emma had made throughout our entire marriage, all purchased from our joint bank account at the credit union. I downloaded 10 complete years of bank statements, thousands of transactions. Every transaction, every date, every amount carefully documented. November 15th. $50 lottery purchase using debit card ending in 7439 at 2:03 in the afternoon. November 8th, $50 same card at 2:15. November 1st, $50 same card at 4:33 in the afternoon. Going backwards through time systematically, week after week, year after year. $50 every single week without fail, sometimes twice weekly depending on jackpot sizes. All marital funds from our joint account, all meticulously documented with dates and times. If they wanted to fight dirty using expensive lawyers, I'd demonstrate exactly what a highly organized construction project manager does when he's properly motivated and has nothing to lose. But I absolutely needed professional legal help, and that meant finding an attorney who could actually stand up to whatever expensive legal sharks the Blackwoods would inevitably hire with their unlimited resources. I spent 2 solid days researching divorce lawyers in our area, reading every review on legal websites, every article in the business journal, calling guys from various construction sites who'd gone through messy divorces and lived to tell about it. One crane operator who'd survived a brutal split in 2022 told me I needed Lawrence Chen, describing him as a complete shark, but our kind of shark, someone who fought for working people against wealthy clients. Lawrence Chen, former law school professor, 25 years specializing exclusively in high-asset divorces where millions were at stake. His consultation fee was $600 just to talk, but his success rate in court spoke volumes about his abilities. I maxed out my credit card, paying it without hesitation. His office occupied one of those converted warehouse buildings downtown that screamed expensive attorney with money. Lawrence himself appeared around 54 years old, distinguished gray at the temples, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly truck payment. He gestured politely to a leather chair across from his enormous mahogany desk and asked me to explain this prenuptial agreement situation. I handed him the copy I'd kept in our home filing cabinet. 9 pages of dense legal language I'd barely comprehended when signing it years ago under pressure. Lawrence read through it methodically and carefully, his expression growing increasingly interested with each page he turned. When he finished reading completely, he looked up at me and told me this was absolutely fascinating, that my in-law's attorney had been remarkably thorough, almost excessively thorough in drafting this document. I asked what exactly he meant by that. He pointed to a specific clause on page 4, section 3.7. This section explicitly states that any prizes, winnings, or awards acquired during the course of marriage shall be considered community property, subject to equal distribution upon dissolution of marriage. "Do you understand what this means for your case?" he asked seriously. I felt something cold settling in my chest as realization dawned. They'd told me lottery winnings were automatically separate property under law. Lawrence explained carefully that under normal state law, lottery tickets purchased with community funds during marriage are indeed community property by default. But even if Emma had used her separate trust fund money, this prenup specifically overrides that protection and makes all winnings community property, regardless. He looked directly at me and asked if I'd read this carefully before signing years ago. I admitted honestly that I'd barely skimmed it under enormous pressure because they wanted it signed before the wedding could proceed. Lawrence smiled genuinely for the first time since I'd walked through his door and told me my in-laws had just handed me the complete blueprint to their own destruction. "So I'm legally entitled to half the money?" I asked cautiously. "According to this document they forced you to sign, potentially yes, absolutely," he confirmed with confidence. He leaned back in his expensive chair and explained we'd need to be extremely strategic because they'd fight this aggressively and they had substantial financial resources to draw on. His retainer was $22,000 up front. I borrowed heavily against my retirement account and maxed out every credit card I owned to pay it. Best investment I ever made in my entire life. The Blackwoods moved fast and decisively. Within 48 hours of Emma filing divorce papers on November 20th, they'd retained Sterling Montgomery from the most expensive divorce firm in the entire region. Montgomery charged $1,100 per hour and had built a fearsome reputation for protecting wealthy clients' assets like some rabid guard dog. His first tactical move was entirely predictable to anyone who knew how these battles worked, sending threatening legal letters demanding I immediately abandon any claim to the lottery winnings or face serious consequences. Thick manila envelopes arrived at my hotel every few days, stuffed with legal language specifically designed to intimidate working-class people. One letter stated explicitly that my frivolous claims regarding separate property lottery winnings constituted maltreatment and bad faith litigation, demanding I cease immediately or face legal sanctions from the court. They underestimated me completely and thoroughly, assuming I was some working-class guy who'd fold under pressure from fancy lawyers. They were catastrophically wrong in that assessment. Meanwhile, Emma was living extravagantly and documenting every single moment on social media for the world to see. Instagram posts showing her brand new luxury electric vehicle, $95,000 purchased just 13 days after depositing the lottery money. Designer shopping sprees at exclusive boutiques that ordinary people couldn't even enter. A weekend trip to wine country, first-class flights, and $500 nightly hotel accommodations at luxury resorts. She put down $850,000 as a deposit on a luxury downtown condominium, 2,200 square feet, with spectacular lake views, posting the real estate photos on social media with captions about new chapters, new homes, and being blessed by good fortune. Her Instagram became this constant parade of expensive restaurants with tiny portions, luxury shopping trips with designer bags, first-class travel to exotic locations. She was spending our money like it was burning holes in her pockets, and social media was documenting absolutely everything in real time. Perfect evidence for demonstrating community property commingling that Lawrence would use later. The formal divorce proceedings began in earnest early December. Montgomery came out aggressively and immediately, filing numerous motions attempting to dismiss my claims entirely and painting me as some opportunistic gold digger exploiting legal loopholes. His strategy was brutally simple and effective against most working-class defendants. Bury me in complex paperwork and bleed me completely dry with legal fees until I accepted whatever lowball settlement they offered just to stop the financial hemorrhaging. Motion to dismiss for lack of standing, motion to compel arbitration, motion for summary judgment, motion for sanctions against me personally. Each one required Lawrence to respond properly, and each response cost me substantial money I didn't have. They were following the standard playbook for high-asset divorces, Lawrence explained during one meeting. Make it so financially devastating to continue that you'll take whatever settlement they offer just to stop the bleeding and survive. But Lawrence was methodical, strategic, and experienced. We subpoenaed detailed bank records demonstrating years of lottery ticket purchases from our joint account at the credit union. We documented Emma's extensive spending spree, proving conclusively she'd mixed lottery money with community assets rather than keeping them separate as required. The discovery phase was absolutely brutal and exhausting. Montgomery fought every single subpoena aggressively, claimed attorney-client privilege on financial documents that clearly weren't privileged under any interpretation, filed motion after motion to delay proceedings and drain my limited resources. By January, Lawrence warned me seriously that my legal bills had already reached $28,000. If this proceeds to actual trial, we're looking at $45,000 minimum total, he said bluntly. Montgomery charges $1,100 per hour, and he's billing every phone call, every email, every minor action taken. I'd invested everything I had in this legal battle. My retirement account was completely tapped out, my credit cards maxed to their absolute limits. I was surviving day to day on construction site lunches and gas station coffee, spending nothing unnecessary. But I'd rather go completely broke fighting than spend the rest of my life knowing I'd given up without trying. Then came the breakthrough that changed everything fundamentally. Lawrence called me in mid-January, excitement clear in his usually controlled voice. He'd found something critical. Montgomery had made a catastrophic error. In his rush to file preliminary motions in December, he'd actually acknowledged in official court documents that the lottery ticket was purchased during the marriage with community funds from our joint account. He'd signed and filed this statement under penalty of perjury. I felt my heart racing as Lawrence explained. This meant Montgomery had just destroyed his own case completely. The filing was right there in black and white, signed by Sterling Montgomery himself with his bar number. The lottery ticket in question was purchased during the marriage with community funds from the parties' joint account. Lawrence sounded almost giddy, telling me he'd been practicing family law for 25 years and had never seen an attorney hand him their client's case so completely and stupidly. By February, the Blackwoods were showing clear signs of nervousness about how the case was developing. Settlement offers started arriving regularly. February 8th, $800,000. Vic called personally, using his condescending voice to tell me to take it and walk away clean, that it was more money than I'd see in a lifetime of construction work. I told him I'd think about it carefully, though I'd already decided firmly. February 22nd, $1.5 million. Be reasonable, Connor, Vic said. That's generational wealth for a working man like you. March 5th, $2.8 million. Montgomery himself called this time, his voice tense, saying his client was prepared to make a final offer. Take it or we'll bury you in legal fees and appeals that could drag on for years, he threatened. I told him calmly I'd see him in court and hung up the phone. By early March, they were getting increasingly desperate. They hired a private investigator, some former police officer who charged $150 per hour to follow me around, hoping to discover damaging information they could use. He documented my trips to hardware stores for work supplies, my lunches at fast food restaurants, my evening walks around the hotel parking lot for exercise. They found absolutely nothing useful because I'd lived a clean, honest life. Next, they tried claiming I'd been emotionally abusive during the marriage, hoping to reduce my settlement under state family code provisions for family violence. Emma gave a lengthy deposition claiming I'd been controlling and manipulative, that I'd isolated her from her family systematically. Problem was, they had zero actual evidence to support these serious accusations. No police reports, no medical records, no witnesses who could corroborate anything she said. Lawrence demolished their claims systematically with phone records showing Emma had made all major financial decisions during our marriage independently. Bank statements proved conclusively I'd never controlled her access to money at any point. Her own social media posts displayed her living freely and happily throughout our entire marriage, traveling and socializing constantly. Lawrence asked Montgomery during one heated deposition whether he was seriously asking the court to believe that a woman being controlled by her husband would post 847 Instagram photos over 10 years showing her at art galleries, wine tastings, and girls' trips to tropical locations with friends. 3 days before trial was scheduled, Emma appeared at my hotel room door unexpectedly. She looked different, exhausted, and worn down. The constant partying and legal stress were clearly taking their physical toll on her. It was 9 at night when she showed up begging. "Please, Connor," she said desperately. "We can work this out somehow. I was scared, okay?" The money overwhelmed me completely. My family got in my head. I asked what she'd been scared of exactly. Sharing our good fortune with your husband? She desperately offered me $4.2 million, more than half the total winnings. We can both start fresh, no more lawyers, no more court dates, just end this nightmare. I looked at this woman I'd loved for 10 years, really looked at her carefully. The expensive designer clothes, the new highlighted hair, the desperation evident in her eyes. I told her calmly it was never about the money for me. It was about respect, about honoring the commitment we made to each other when we married. She left crying, and I almost felt sorry for her. Almost, but not quite. March 22nd. County Family Court, courtroom number 3. Judge Rodriguez, presiding. A 15-year veteran of the family court bench known for thorough preparation and zero tolerance for legal gamesmanship from expensive attorneys. The courthouse was absolutely packed with observers. Word had spread throughout the legal community about the case. Construction worker versus oil money had become a genuine local interest story. News crews from multiple television stations stationed themselves outside hoping for interviews. Blue-collar David Battle's wealthy Goliath was the morning headline in the newspaper. I wore my best suit, navy blue from a department store that I'd bought for our wedding 10 years earlier. Lawrence had suggested wearing something more expensive to impress the judge, but I wanted to be myself and authentic. The irony wasn't lost on me that this was the exact same suit I'd worn when I promised to love Emma for richer or poorer in good times and bad. Emma sat with her family on one side of the courtroom looking pale and nervous, her hands trembling visibly. The entire Blackwood clan was present in force. Vic in his expensive tailored Brioni suit, Charlotte clutching her designer Hermes handbag that cost thousands, Dylan checking his luxury Rolex watch every few minutes nervously. Montgomery whispered urgently in Emma's ear, probably preparing her for the testimony to come and what was about to happen. Judge Rodriguez took her seat at exactly 9 o'clock in the morning. Montgomery stood confidently for his opening statement, though I noticed his hands trembling slightly with nervousness. He spent 20 minutes arguing eloquently that Emma had selected those lottery numbers based on meaningful family dates, that she'd purchased that ticket with her own intuition and hope for the future, that she'd won through her own luck and perseverance. He gestured toward me dismissively, claiming I was attempting to exploit a technical loophole to steal money I had absolutely no part in earning through my own efforts. Lawrence remained seated calmly, taking detailed notes on his yellow legal pad, looking completely relaxed like some chess master watching his opponent walk directly into an elaborate trap. When Judge Rodriguez called on Lawrence for his opening statement, he stood slowly like he had all the time in the world. He kept it remarkably simple and direct. We have a prenuptial agreement signed by both parties in December 2017 that explicitly states any prizes or winnings acquired during marriage are community property subject to division. We have state family code law that supports this position strongly. We have documentation proving the ticket was purchased with community funds from the joint account during the marriage. He paused deliberately and looked directly at Montgomery. The defendants are asking this court to ignore their own contract because they don't like the outcome now. But contracts mean what they say, not what we wish they said after the fact when money is involved. The evidence phase was absolutely devastating for Emma's side of the case. Lawrence presented comprehensive bank records showing 10 full years of lottery ticket purchases from our joint account at the credit union. 10 years of $50 weekly purchases, all meticulously documented. all from community marital funds. He demonstrated clearly how Emma had commingled the lottery winnings with community assets instead of keeping them separate as required by law if she wanted to claim them as separate property. The luxury vehicle purchase, the designer shopping sprees, the condominium deposit, all completed within weeks of winning the lottery. He had the original receipt from the grocery store where she bought the winning ticket on November 15th at 3:42 in the afternoon, paid for with our joint debit card ending in 7439. The turning point came fast. Lawrence opened a file and started reading Montgomery's own court filing word for word. He raised the December motion and quoted the line where Montgomery clearly said the lottery ticket was bought during the marriage with joint funds from their shared account. "Do you remember writing and signing that?" Lawrence asked. Montgomery's face turned pale. The room went silent. He stammered that it was a mistake, just an error. Lawrence reminded him he had signed it under oath. Judge Rodriguez leaned in and asked if he was admitting to filing false documents. Montgomery stuttered again, saying he didn't mean it that way. The Blackwoods looked sick as the weight of it hit them. Emma then took the stand. Lawrence questioned her carefully. She had said earlier she meant to keep the lottery money separate, so he asked why she'd put the $11.2 million into the same personal account she'd been using for household bills since 2019. She had another account with $73,000 that I never had access to, but she didn't use that one. She mixed the lottery cash with everything else and started spending like there was no tomorrow. Lawrence listed every major expense one by one. The $95,000 car, the designer bags and clothes, the fancy wine trip, the luxury condo. Each time, Emma admitted under oath she used lottery money without asking me, even though we were still legally married. Court broke for lunch at 12:30. In the hallway, Vic came up to me, furious. He said they'd appeal any ruling and drag the case out for years, trying to drain me dry. I told him calmly that was his choice, but I had time and a good lawyer. His face flushed red as he called me an ungrateful nobody. I told him softly they'd only accepted me until money showed up, then tried to toss me aside. The afternoon hearing was short. Judge Rodriguez had made up her mind. She reviewed the evidence and the law. The prenup we'd signed in December 2017 was crystal clear. It said any winnings during the marriage belonged to both of us. State law backed that up. Emma's own actions, mixing the winnings with marital funds, proved she knew it too. Emma started crying as her mom gripped her hand. "In this state, we honor contracts," Judge Rodriguez said firmly. "The defendants can't rewrite their own prenup just because they don't like the outcome." She looked at me and announced she was awarding me half of the net lottery winnings, $5.6 million. Emma had 90 days to pay. The gavel fell at 2:22 p.m., ending it. Outside, reporters shouted questions. I ignored most. One asked how it felt to win against people with deep pockets. Standing in the sun, I thought of everything I'd been through and simply said, "Justice feels good when it wins." 6 months later, in September, I used part of the settlement to buy the construction company from my boss, who was retiring to Florida. Today, my business has 41 employees. We build affordable homes for working families. Starter houses, duplexes, small neighborhoods, real homes for real people. Emma sold her luxury car at a loss, returned the condo deposit, and unloaded most of her designer goods. Many were never even used. Last I heard, she was working at her dad's real estate office for $38,000 a year and living in a small one-bedroom in a rougher part of town. Her social media went silent after the trial. The Blackwoods cut all contact, which suited me just fine. They showed their true colors when they tried to throw me away like trash. Vic even sold 2 of his prized vintage watches to help cover the settlement. Montgomery's law firm billed them $340,000 for losing. Lawrence charged me $47,000. A bill I paid gladly. The best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's letting people face the results of their greed. They forced me to sign that prenup, thinking it protected them. In the end, it protected me. My old pickup still runs like a charm. Some things are worth keeping, and sometimes the same contract meant to keep you down can be the tool that lifts you up. The Blackwoods learned that lesson the expensive way.